A reading from the Gospel according to Luke, from the 18th chapter, verses 1 through 8. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. He said, in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to the judge and saying, "Grant me justice against my accuser." For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, "Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out by continually coming." And the Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will God delay long in helping them? I tell you, God will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" Here ends the reading from the Gospel.
So Jesus is walking around Galilee on the border with Samaria. He's talking to various groups of people, and at some point he says this to his disciples. In a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, "Grant me justice against my opponent." For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, "Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out by continually coming." That's it. That's the story. There's this judge who lacks humility. He doesn't have any feelings of awe toward God, and he has no respect for his fellow human beings. And there's this widow. Her source of support and income is dead. She has sued someone whom she believes has wronged her, and her case has come before this judge. Jesus doesn't tell us if her case is justified or not. She could be bringing false cases against people in order to support herself or to take advantage of others who have more resources. She could be a crazy lady who sues everybody because she can, or she might have a just cause and truly be desperate for a judgment in her favor. Whatever the case, she is persistent. She asks the judge again and again and again and again and again for a favorable judgment in her case. He finally gives her what she wants, not based on law or compassion or rational thought. He makes no leap of empathy here. He gives her what she wants, so she'll leave him alone. I will grant her justice so that she may not wear me out by continually coming. The Greek word hypopiazo, which sounds more Italian to me, literally means to hit under the eye. It was a boxing term, also used figuratively in the sense of to wear down. The judge is feeling like he's getting a fist under the eye repeatedly, so he lets her win, so she will stop. Now, why on earth would Jesus tell a story like that? It's not like we are supposed to think of God as an unjust, callous judge, meting out justice randomly based on how much pain we cause him or her. In fact, it doesn't seem to be an allegory at all. It's more a parable about how people treat each other. Then again, he could just be describing some people he knows or a conversation he overheard. So then Luke, whoever wrote these words down for a particular congregation or group of listeners, Luke frames it as a spiritual admonition for them and us. He says, Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. And then he explains it, but pretends that Jesus is explaining it. And the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? In other words, you all need to trust God more. If you need something, go to God. You won't have to work as hard to get what you need because God actually cares about people and about justice. So those of you who are finding a faithful life to be a challenge and are disheartened, buck up and get with it. Get your trust belts on and start praying to the one who made you. Luke used this story to fortify his flock. But none of this is what Jesus actually said. And what he actually said could be interpreted a number of ways. Let's throw out a few possibilities. In the time of Jesus, Jews believed that judges and kings served under the jurisdiction and at the will of God. However, Jesus points out, the justice system is not necessarily fair or compassionate, and it's not always open to God's leadings. It is subject to the personalities of humans who can be callous and corrupt. Some judges are hard-hearted. They may be very self-aware about that. We might go down the list of our Supreme Court judges and see where they might fall on our compassion scale. Widows are not all helpless and powerless. Some of them have internal resources. They have chutzpah and use it. Take a lesson from this one. If you think your cause is just, you will have to fight for it. Right or wrong, if you want to win, you will have to be relentless. Think about phone calls with your insurance company. Think about the times you've given in to your kids, not because they were right, but because you were tired of hearing about it. When you think of fighting for your cause, think of a boxing match. Don't take me literally, don't hit with your fist, but hit with your words, your dogged persistence and willingness to stay standing to the end. No need to thank the judge unless you feel like it. He will be glad to be rid of you. It's possible that even within a corrupt system, God's influence can be perceived and accessed. Transformation is available for all involved. So think about this. Do any of you have experience fighting for what you perceive to be a just cause in the face of an unjust legal system? Do any of you have a story about the impact of persistence over time? About the presence of God where you believed God to be absent? I look forward to hearing your stories after worship. Some cultural examples can be found in fights for racial and economic justice, public education, women's rights, labor laws, immigration law, marriage equality. In addition, we can look at the fights against the Affordable Health Care Act, for corporate personhood, against economic oversight in the banking system. Many of those fighting those fights see them as fights for personal freedom, and they are just in their list of goals. Like Luke, you can find multiple ways to relate to this story. That's the beauty of a story or a sermon. It has a different connection point, a different core meaning to every individual or community that hears it. Some stories cause us to think about them again and again and again and again. Some stories inspire us to action or comfort us in difficult situations. Other stories lead us into a leap of empathy, causing us to care about someone or a category of people in a new way. Some of you may know the story of Bruce Olson, told in his autobiography, Brutschko. He is a Scandinavian-American Christian missionary known for his work in bringing Christianity to the previously untouchable Motilone Indians of Colombia and Venezuela in the 1960s. The Motilone were uncorrupted by Westerners because they killed anyone who came within a certain radius of their territory in the jungle. This 19-year-old Minnesota kid was gifted in languages, learning Greek and Latin in his teen years when other kids were playing basketball. He is currently fluent in about 16 languages. He was put off by the judgmental theology of his parents' Lutheran church and became a born-again convert, which led him to a missionary conference and ultimately to South America and to the Motilone. On approach, they shot him with poisonous arrows, their usual response to danger. But he survived, and making a leap of empathy, they took him in, healed him, and allowed him to join their community. For 20 years, he lived as one of them. Speaking of persistence, he learned their body language and customs, and most importantly, their stories. And he began to tell them stories about Jesus and writing a translation of the Bible in body. He was ingenious in the telling, making sure Motilone culture was mirrored there so they could relate, something called dynamic equivalence. For example, he completely reversed the metaphor used in Matthew 7:24. In that tribe's culture, only a fool would build his house on a rock, and the obvious wise place was to build a house on the sand. Architectural references were also modified. In their culture, the box-like rectangular architecture, familiar to us, is considered ugly. Virtuous architecture is all round. I read his book a number of years ago. The one thing I remember most clearly was the discovery that they had a story about a human who became an ant in order to teach ants how to build their houses. And that was the vehicle for Olson to tell the story of God who became a man in order to teach human beings how to live. And that was the connection and conversion point for the tribe. And that was the beginning of the end of the pristine Motilone way of life. They stopped fighting with another tribe, longtime enemies, and converted them to Christianity as well. They stopped shooting strangers with arrows, which allowed more predatory Westerners, oil companies for instance, into their territory to take advantage of them. And then they had another fight on their hands. Olson has since helped them become advocates on their own behalf and on behalf of other tribal peoples. He helped them establish a written language, schools, community health centers, and even to work with the Colombian government to protect their lands. As young people began to be fluent in both body and Spanish, they studied to become doctors, lawyers, and other professionals, but brought their expertise back to the tribe, using it from within their culture. Olson was never sanctioned or approved by any missionary institution. He worked outside the guidelines of the establishment. Thus, this was a key distinction of Olson's missionary work. Rather than westernizing or Americanizing the Motilone, he made a concerted effort to become part of the indigenous tribe. Most of the changes that have come to the tribe have come within their culture, honoring and respecting their culture rather than replacing it with the culture of the Western world. And this has resulted in criticism from some cultures, but many more missionaries have taken his work as an example to follow. So why did the story of Brutschko, his Motilone name, come to mind when I was thinking about the persistent widow? Some connection points for me. I don't know if Olson's motivation to convert the Motilone to Christianity was particularly just or even a good idea, but I admire his persistence. I believe his own patience and persistence, curiosity about others, and facility with language and storytelling allowed God to use him for some ultimate good. God is also persistent and patient, more like a widow with chutzpah than a self-important judge. This realization gives me hope in the wake of so much that is going on in Washington, D.C., and Florida, and Texas, and other centers of power where justice and personal freedom have been twisted into surrealistic battles against the common good. God can bring this to a just conclusion somehow, even here, even in South America or Kenya or Afghanistan. And even if I am resistant to a leap of empathy in my dealings with people that I perceive to be pathological, perhaps God will use me for good anyway. There's more, but my brain is tired, and I'd rather hear from you now. Let's sing and pray and talk. I'm dying to know what you think. We affirm the goodness of life and the openness of the future because our God is a God of life and love. As God comes to us in this act of worship, so let us go out to others in acts which bring healing, reconciliation, and hope to our world. Amen.